"You can't sit here," she said sharply, not even looking up. Her $25,000 Hermes bag lay sprawled across the seat like it owned the place, like she did. "This is first class," she added, with a smirk behind oversized Dior sunglasses. "Try coach." He paused, boarding pass in hand. It read, "Seat 1A, Regalis Airways, JFK bound." His name printed in bold, Nathaniel Cross. But she didn't care, didn't move the bag, didn't ask, didn't look, didn't expect that he, of all people, belonged in a space like this. And unfortunately for her, she had no idea he wasn't just a passenger. He was the CEO of the entire airline. Tell us where you're watching from, because what happened next wasn't turbulence. It was justice in motion. Palm Beach. International's private terminal didn't scream wealth. It whispered it. Polished marble, custom art, the kind of quiet where people spoke softly, not because they had to, but because they were used to being listened to. Nathaniel Cross had walked through dozens of terminals like this. First-class lounges in Dubai, executive check-ins in Zurich, VIP gates in Singapore. But none of them ever fully erased what he knew too well. Some people still saw him as out of place, even in a $6,000 Tom Ford suit, even with a platinum-tier boarding pass, even on the airline he personally rebuilt from bankruptcy to global prestige. So when the woman at 1B threw him that condescending glance, cool, dismissive, practiced, it didn't rattle him. He was used to being underestimated. He just wasn't used to letting it slide. "I believe this is my seat," he said evenly, voice low but firm. She raised a perfectly manicured hand, tapping the crocodile leather handle of her Hermes bag like it was a pet. "It's occupied," she said, eyes still hidden behind lenses far too large for the cabin's lighting. Nathaniel showed her his pass again. "Seat 1A. A few passengers turned. You could feel it, that subtle shift in cabin energy. Someone in row 2 adjusted their AirPods. A man in 3D tapped his phone's camera app. Karen, though no one had said her name aloud yet, sighed theatrically. "I don't feel safe," she said louder this time, glancing at the flight attendant hovering nearby. "He's being confrontational." That word, that trap. Nathaniel felt it settle into the air like fog, a phrase weaponized to shut down dignity. No evidence, no escalation, just vibes and assumption. The young flight attendant, Jessica, based on her name tag, froze for a beat. She glanced at Nathaniel, then at Karen, then back again. I'm sorry, sir," she said carefully. "Would you mind stepping aside just for a moment while we sort this out?" She didn't mean harm, but that's the thing about bias in uniforms. It doesn't always wear a hood. Sometimes it wears polite smiles and corporate grooming. Nathaniel gave a nod. No protest, no visible reaction. He picked up his briefcase and turned. Karen leaned back like she'd just defended her castle. She hadn't. She'd just invited a storm into her house. Inside the private executive lounge, Nathaniel entered a side room accessible only to senior airline executives and federal regulators. The glass door closed with a muted hiss behind him. He sat, exhaled, then pulled out a thin black tablet. Not a regular iPad, not something bought in stores. This was custom hardware, encrypted 6 ways, tied directly into a live ethics infrastructure used by 9 international airports and over $3 billion in ESG aviation funding. On the home screen it read, EthicAir Index, Admin Override Access User, N, Cross Position, Chairman and Final Compliance Authority. He tapped once. A dashboard appeared. Regalis Airways was still in good standing, barely, but that wouldn't last long. He opened the sub-panel. Emergency Ethical Downgrade, Incident 87FL. A prompt flashed. Confirmed downgrade to non-compliant status for Regalis Airways. Estimated impact, 4 international airport suspensions, JFK, Heathrow, Charles de Gaulle, Toronto Pearson. 880 Mumbos ESG funding visibility withdrawn. Ethics alert to regulatory partners. Passenger, internal review. Initiated, Nathaniel didn't blink. He tapped, confirm. And with that, he didn't just take back his seat. He pulled the rug out from under an empire. Back on board, Karen Lancaster was still scrolling her phone, now composing a smug little caption. Secured my spot. First class isn't for everyone, standards. She didn't notice that her airline systems were lagging, that booking confirmations were freezing, that a message had just been sent from EthicAir's global dashboard to 142 ESG fund managers. She didn't know who Nathaniel Cross was, but in less than 5 minutes, she'd find out. In the corner of the EthicAir index platform, a silent ripple moved outward. Airport systems paused. ESG analysts flagged Regalis, and funding accounts at Morgan Ethic and Blue Vantage began withdrawal protocols. Karen thought she just won a petty moment. She hadn't won. She'd tripped a wire built by the man she humiliated. And now, the entire flight and the whole industry was about to feel the consequences. Inside the aircraft, the champagne had lost its chill. The air in first class wasn't just still. It was tense, tight, like everyone had just witnessed something they couldn't quite name, but knew was wrong. Karen Lancaster reclined in her seat, shoulders smugly squared. The Hermes bag still occupied 1A, perfectly centered and untouched. She was scrolling through Instagram again, already crafting a clever caption to frame her moment of assertion. Something along the lines of, "Don't let anyone take your space, ever." #empowerment, or whatever her version of it was. She didn't notice the murmurs growing behind her. She didn't see the man in 3D discreetly reviewing the footage he just recorded on his phone, or the flight attendant near the galley biting her lip, unsure what to do next. But Serena Lowe noticed. She was sitting hundreds of miles away, in a glass-walled operations suite tucked inside a 54-story tower in downtown Chicago, the headquarters of Skylux Holdings, parent company of Regalis Airways. Serena wasn't just watching any flight. She was watching Flight 487, and she wasn't just anyone. She was Chief Ethics and Risk Officer for EthicAir Index, the compliance infrastructure that Nathaniel Cross himself had built over the last decade. When the non-compliant downgrade signal came through on her secure dashboard with the tag, Flag 87FL, Authorized, N. Cross. Serena stood up before she even finished reading. Full alert protocol, internal only, she told her team, voice calm but firm. A cluster of analysts turned from their desks. Road impact? Someone asked. JFK, Heathrow, Toronto, Charles de Gaulle, Serena replied without looking up. She tapped into Regalis's ESG Partner Visibility dashboard. Pull ESG linkage from public view. Begin phase 1 of audit triggers and flag any media alerts. A junior compliance tech raised her hand. Are we initiating total freeze? Serena's eyes narrowed. Not yet, she said. We're watching first. Back at the gate, the ground crew didn't know why, but boarding systems had started lagging. Scanners glitched, passenger manifests froze. The seating chart on the terminal screen blinked twice, then reset. The woman at the gate tapped the monitor. That's odd, she muttered. Inside the cabin, Jessica, the flight attendant who had asked Nathaniel to step aside, stood awkwardly near the galley. She'd just come from a quiet conference with the purser, Alan. Their faces were drawn. We can't keep ignoring it, Jessica whispered. The tension. People are filming. They're going to post it. Alan rubbed his forehead. You saw the boarding pass. The seat was his. So why didn't we back him? Alan didn't answer. Out on the tarmac, Nathaniel sat in a discreet corner of the executive boarding lounge, tablet open again. He wasn't checking news. He wasn't reviewing emails. He was watching the numbers. One box blinked. ESG visibility status, suspended. Impacted amount, $880,000 US sponsoring partners. Morgan Ethic, Greenline Capital, ESG Core Alliance. Nathaniel watched it all without expression. Then, quietly, he sent a short encrypted message to Serena. Phase 2 authorized. Proceed silently. Do not disrupt cabin. She received it instantly. Inside EthicAir's operations hub, Serena nodded at her team. Execute Phase 2. One analyst entered the command. Another opened a secure comms feed to airport partner systems. Boarding permissions across 4 major airports were automatically revoked for Regalis flights, pending ethics re-review. Serena turned to her deputy. Notify FAA oversight. Confidential, level 3. Mr. Cross is observing. The room hushed. Everyone knew what level 3 meant. Ethical override authorized by system architect. And when he moved, it wasn't a warning. It was judgment. Back on the plane, Karen finally noticed something wasn't right. The engines hadn't started. The captain hadn't spoken. The crew kept exchanging glances. She flagged Jessica with a flick of her hand. "Excuse me," she said, tone sharp. "Why haven't we pushed back? I have a schedule." Jessica hesitated. "We're experiencing a small systems delay, ma'am. Should be resolved shortly." Karen narrowed her eyes. "This isn't acceptable. I'll be reporting this." Jessica said nothing. The man in row 3 who'd been filming earlier leaned toward his neighbor. "That's her," he whispered. "The one who kicked him out of his own seat." Someone 2 rows back nodded. "Yeah, but did you hear? He's the CEO." "Wait, what?" At that moment, a secure call connected between the CEO of Regalis Airways, a man named Mark Toland, and Serena Lowe. Mark's voice was tight. "Tell me this isn't happening." Serena didn't flinch. "Your airline was flagged. EthicAir Index has authorized a downgrade. CEO Cross approved it personally." "I didn't even know he was on that flight." "You should have," Serena said simply. Mark cursed under his breath. "Start containment," he barked at his assistant. "Call the captain. Get her to move the damn bag. Reverse this." "You can't reverse this," Serena interrupted. "It's done." Mark's stomach dropped. Minutes later, a gate agent entered the cabin, whispering urgently to Alan the purser. Alan's face paled. He turned to Jessica. "It's official. We're grounded. Cabin crew is to stand down. HQ's involved." Jessica's eyes widened. They both turned toward Karen. "Ma'am," Alan began gently, "we're going to need you to—" "I'm not moving," Karen snapped. "I've done nothing wrong. Please, just let us reassign the seat. It's—" "No. That man made a scene. I'm the one who felt unsafe." Now the cabin heard her clearly. The businessman in row 3 finally stood. "For the record," he said loudly, phone in hand, camera already recording, Mr. Cross never raised his voice. He was polite. She refused to move her bag. Another voice joined, a woman in 2D. "I saw the whole thing. She was aggressive. He stayed calm." Karen's face flushed. "You don't know what you're talking about," she hissed. But no one defended her. For the first time, she looked around and realized she was completely alone. Outside, in the lounge, Nathaniel received the update. "Containment failed. Viral exposure rising. Proceed to Phase 3. He tapped once. "Yes." At EthicAir, Serena turned to her team. "Alert ESG audit partners. Pull ratings visibility for Regalis. Notify institutional investors. Suspend ESG core affiliation for 72 hours. The room moved like a machine. $880 million in ESG-linked funding. Gone. Karen's actions had just cost her father's airline a near billion-dollar black mark. And the man she dismissed like a baggage handler? He had written the rules they'd just violated. Back in the aircraft, the captain finally made an announcement. "Ladies and gentlemen, we are currently facing an unforeseen operational delay. Please remain seated as we work with our partners to resolve the issue." Whispers filled the cabin. Someone near the back muttered, "Bet this has something to do with what happened earlier." Karen sat frozen. She opened her phone, searched. Nathaniel Cross. And there it was. Profile after profile. CEO of Regalis. Chairman of EthicAir Index. A headline popped up on Bloomberg. "The man who can ground you with one tap." She stared at the screen. Suddenly, the seat didn't feel so secure anymore. The engines were still off, the doors still open, and the woman in seat 1B was still acting like this plane belonged to her. But outside the aircraft, beyond the tinted windows and champagne menus, something far bigger was unfolding. The man in row 3, who'd quietly filmed Karen's confrontation with Nathaniel just 20 minutes earlier, had just posted the video to Twitter with a blunt caption, "Woman refuses to let black man sit in his assigned first-class seat." He turns out to be the CEO. Within 6 minutes, it had 34,000 views. At minute 10, it hit 140K. By the time the flight attendant came back with another vague apology, and that Nathaniel Cross was trending globally. And Karen Lancaster? She was about to become famous for all the wrong reasons. In the Regalis Airways control tower, the crisis team was already in motion. The emergency phone lines in the executive wing rang in tandem. The chief comms officer, the head of legal, and the VP of public affairs were all in one glass-walled room by 9:12 a.m. CEO Mark Toland was pacing. "I need to speak to him," he barked. "Now." Serena Lowe, patched in from the EthicAir Index war room, answered calmly. "Nathaniel's not taking calls. He's observing. So far, he's let the system speak for him." Mark turned red. "Observing while we bleed out?" "No," Serena corrected. "Observing while we prove whether we deserve to survive this." A junior analyst appeared in the doorway. "Sir, the video just crossed 2.1 million views. It's everywhere. YouTube, TikTok, even CNN's catching it." Mark slammed the desk. "Shut it down." "You can't," Serena said coldly. "It's not just trending, it's proof." He froze. And for the first time, Regalis Airways looked like it might not survive its own flight. Meanwhile, in first class, Karen was unraveling. She'd started out confident, annoyed, but composed. Then came the first whispers. Then the woman in 2A turned her back to her. Then Jessica, the flight attendant, stopped making eye contact. Now, everyone was avoiding her, but not because they were intimidated, because they were disgusted. "Excuse me," Karen said to Jessica, rising slightly. "I think we've waited long enough. This is unacceptable." Jessica cleared her throat. "Ma'am, you may want to check your phone." "I don't care about my phone. I care about this airline wasting my time." But curiosity got the best of her. She picked up her phone, opened Safari, typed Nathaniel Cross. The first result wasn't a bio. It was a video. Her video. Karen's face went white. She watched herself sneering, blocking the seat with her Hermes bag, tossing out "Try Coach" like it was a punchline. And then, the comments. The audacity. She didn't even look at him. This is why ethics systems exist. A reminder that quiet power hits hardest. Plot twist, he owns the airline. She dropped her phone. Jessica crouched beside her. "Ma'am, I need to ask you to remain calm." "I want off this flight," Karen whispered, voice trembling. "Right now." Jessica stood. "You will be escorted off shortly, but not quietly." In Chicago, Serena received the next clearance signal from Nathaniel. "Escalate to passenger ethics flag. Individual ID K. Lancaster." She smiled softly. "Phase 4, she said. Let the airline handle her removal, but ethics tracking stays live." At JFK, the terminal gates flashed red on the Regalis departure board. 4 flights were grounded. 2 more delayed due to internal audit hold. One ESG investment fund publicly announced it had pulled out of its Regalis backing, citing serious ethical misalignment with current global values. And the FAA Ethics Oversight Division had just scheduled a same-day meeting with Regalis's board of directors. All from one moment, one woman, one bag, and the man she refused to look in the eye. Meanwhile, in the executive lounge, Nathaniel Cross remained quiet. He hadn't spoken to the media, hadn't posted a single tweet, hadn't responded to the CEO's calls. But he was watching. He watched the data feed rise on the EthicAir dashboard. He watched the investor fund outflows tick upward, 121 nm, 249 nm, then past 300 mm. He watched Karen's name shift from passenger manifest to compliance record. He didn't smile. He didn't celebrate. He just exhaled. Calm. Focused. Like a man who had been here before and built the system to make sure it would never be ignored again. Inside the aircraft, the door finally opened. 2 uniformed ground agents walked in. Behind them, a woman from airport operations. Her blazer had the faint silver pin of FAA authority. "Karen Lancaster?" the woman asked. Karen stood slowly, dazed. "Yes," she said, barely above a whisper. "You'll need to come with us." Karen looked around the cabin. Every single passenger was watching. Some looked down. Others looked directly at her. But no one said a word. She picked up her Hermes bag, suddenly much heavier than before, and stepped into the aisle. As she passed seat 1A, now cleared and waiting, she glanced sideways. Nathaniel wasn't there, but his presence was. Every square inch of that cabin now knew exactly who he was, and exactly what she'd done. By the time Karen exited the aircraft, the video had hit 7.4 million views. News anchors were calling it a reckoning. Nathaniel Cross was being called a silent reformer. And Regalis Airways was facing the biggest ethics-based liquidity freeze in its history, all because one woman thought her bag had more rights than a man's name on a ticket. The phone buzzed again. 4th time in an hour. Nathaniel didn't flinch. He was seated in a private terminal lounge, glass of still water in one hand, the EthicAir dashboard on the tablet in the other. Numbers were moving fast. But he didn't rush. The last call had come from the FAA. This one was direct, Regalis Airways main line. He finally picked it up. "Nathaniel, hey, it's Mark. Look, we need to talk." Mark Toland, CEO of Regalis, sounded breathless. "I just got out of the emergency board session. We're doing everything. Karen's been placed on leave. The flight crew is being reviewed. Please tell me there's something we can do." Nathaniel didn't respond. "I know this isn't just about what happened to you," Mark continued. "This is about trust, about perception. We're ready to work with EthicAir. Hell, you can even take over the audit team if you want." "You're misunderstanding something, Mark." Silence. "This isn't about a partnership. This is about integrity. And you can't outsource that." Click. The call ended. Nathaniel placed the phone face down on the leather armrest. The screen of his tablet lit up again. An alert from EthicAir's compliance feed. $604 million in ESG funding withdrawn. 2 additional airports preparing to freeze cooperation. The system was speaking for him now. On CNN, the headline read, "Not just Karen, how aviation ethics may be changing for good." Lisa Harrow, a former FAA advisor, was calm but intense. People are focusing on this woman and her designer bag, but they're missing the larger arc. Nathaniel Cross is the lead architect of EthicAir, an ethics rating platform that just downgraded Regalis Airways to critical watch. That's not a PR issue, that's an operational catastrophe. The anchor nodded. So this could spread? It's already spreading. On TikTok, a video of Karen being escorted off the plane had crossed 4.7 million views. But the comments had shifted. This isn't about just one lady anymore. How many other CEOs have been treated like trash when they weren't wearing a suit? EthicAir is doing what the FAA never had the guts to do. Power doesn't shout, it logs in. The clip had been reposted by 3 senators, 5 major influencers, and a non-profit ethics group that tagged the FAA directly. By mid-morning, Karen's name wasn't even trending anymore. The system was. In a downtown DC office, the FAA's ethics division had just greenlit an emergency review. "Pull Regalis's last 90 days of compliance logs," the director said. "Every ignored bias complaint. Every passenger incident not filed." His assistant handed him a file. "Sir, EthicAir already flagged 17. 17? Yes, and they weren't minor." The director exhaled. Then this isn't about one bad crew. No, sir, she said. It's about a bad pattern. Nathaniel finally rose from his seat, calmly adjusted his cuffs, gathered his things. The assistant walking beside him tried to catch up. Sir, we've just had another 2 ESG funds exit. Combined impact, $880 million frozen. Nathaniel gave a slight nod. Behind them, the Regalis electronic display board began flickering. 6 upcoming international routes had been suspended, all linked to airports tied to EthicAir's compliance program. He didn't need to announce it. He didn't need to explain. The entire terminal had become the announcement. Karen was sitting in a beige room, miles away from the chaos she started. Her phone screen was a storm. Emails from brands she worked with, comments under her lifestyle blog. Even her volunteer position at the art museum had temporarily paused her affiliation. People are calling me first-class Karen now, she said to her agent. Better than the face of modern racism, he muttered. Karen looked up. He didn't even yell. He didn't have to. At 10:15 a.m., Bloomberg published a simple banner. Regalis Airways loses $880 million ESG backing amid ethics firestorm. It wasn't flashy. It wasn't emotional. But it hit like a freight train across every boardroom tied to Regalis stock. Behind the scenes, 4 ESG fund managers were already holding emergency meetings. Insurance risk scores were being recalculated, and airport authorities began pre-filing cooperation suspensions pending full EthicAir clearance. Outside JFK, Nathaniel stepped into a waiting black car. His assistant followed with the tablet. Final numbers confirmed. Regalis is now marked as non-compliant. That triggers the 72-hour block from green zone airports? Yes, sir. Nathaniel closed the door behind him. The hum of the city faded. He glanced once more at the screen. The map showed a ripple effect across Europe and North America. Delayed gates, suspended access, review protocols in red. Not chaos. Correction. He leaned back, folded his hand, and said quietly, "Let them feel it," in silence. And the car pulled into traffic. The morning headlines had already been brutal, but the afternoon reaction was something else entirely. It wasn't outrage anymore. It was awe. Nathaniel Cross didn't need a press conference. He didn't even need to tweet, said MSNBC's late morning anchor, looking dead into the camera. He built the system, and then he let it speak for him. Clips from the JFK lounge leaked. Security footage showing him walking out, alone, not flanked by lawyers or PR agents. No entourage, no apology, just silence wrapped in power. By 11:32 a.m., 3 different think pieces had gone viral. The Art of the Quiet Strike, What Corporate America Can Learn from Nathaniel Cross. When the CEO is the system, why EthicAir just became the industry's moral compass. Forget cancel culture. This is consequence culture at scale. At the Capitol, something shifted. Senator Karen Whitmore, who rarely commented on corporate scandals, posted a rare joint statement with 2 other Senate Transportation Committee members. We are actively reviewing current FAA compliance protocols and accountability measures in light of the EthicAir-led case against Regalis Airways. We are grateful to industry leaders who refuse to remain silent in the face of systemic mistreatment. Not once did they name Nathaniel directly, but they didn't have to. At a downtown rooftop in D.C., Tessa Delgado, Director of ESG Strategy at Arctis Capital, was halfway through a lunch meeting when her phone exploded. She had been on that flight. She saw it all. Karen's handbag, the comment about Coach, the stewardess who smirked instead of intervening. And she had said nothing. Until now. She took to LinkedIn. I'm not proud to admit I said nothing. I was tired. I had meetings. I didn't want to make a scene. But I watched a man get publicly diminished in silence. And now I realize he never needed to shout, because he built a system that speaks louder than any room. Today, I pulled all Arctis Capital backing from Regalis Airways. That was my seat 1B. We stand with EthicAir. Within an hour, Her post had 41,000 shares. The next day, Arctis Capital pulled 210 alarms from 2 additional airlines pending ethics reviews. Inside Regalis's headquarters, the mood was nuclear. The boardroom lights had been dimmed to avoid glare from the 20 reporters camped outside the building. Mark Toland paced in front of the whiteboard, sweating through his collar. "What do we do when he won't even speak to us? He won't talk to the press. He won't come to the table. He won't even accept our offer for a joint statement." No one responded. The compliance officer finally said, "We underestimated EthicAir, and now we're under their lens." Another executive chimed in. "They're saying airports will begin requiring EthicAir compliance clearance for route renewal in Q3. If that happens, we're locked out of half our international lines." Mark slammed his marker down. "This was supposed to be about one woman and one flight." The CFO replied evenly, "And that's where you're wrong. This was never about the woman. It was about how we let her represent the airline." Meanwhile, Nathaniel sat in his office in Manhattan, looking over quarterly data that had nothing to do with Regalis. A team member entered quietly. "Mr. Cross, you've had 37 interview requests today. CNN, CNBC, BBC World, even Trevor Noah's podcast." He didn't look up. "Decline all of them." The assistant paused. "They're not just asking about Regalis anymore. They want your take on what happens next." Nathaniel folded the file shut. "I don't give takes. I build systems." The assistant nodded. "Yes, sir." Outside his office window, 3 buildings had just switched their external LED lighting to blue. A quiet show of support for EthicAir's growing influence. By late afternoon, a new ripple formed. EthicAir's own servers crashed temporarily due to overwhelming traffic. Parents were writing in asking how to get their children to intern there. 2 Ivy League professors issued papers calling it the first credible AI-aligned ethics infrastructure for consumer aviation. And every airline PR team in North America was scrambling to recheck their internal ethics data. At 4:16 p.m., something unusual happened. A video began to circulate. Not professionally shot, no drama. Just a quiet moment from a first-class cabin, filmed on someone's phone weeks ago. It showed a flight attendant speaking with visible respect to a black grandmother in seat 1C. The flight crew offering her a blanket, asking gently about her comfort. The old woman smiling softly. That airline? Beacon Air. In less than 30 minutes, the video racked up 1.2 million likes and comments flooded in. This is what flying should look like. I checked. Beacon Air is already gold certified on EthicAir. I'm switching airlines. The domino effect had started. Back in Regalis HQ, someone knocked on the door with a trembling hand. Mark looked up. It's Zurich. They're pulling our Zurich-Boston route. They said they no longer consider us EthicAir admissible. That was the first time anyone had said it out loud. EthicAir admissible. A new standard. A new gatekeeper. And Nathaniel Cross never had to say a single word. Regalis headquarters, 7:04 p.m. The fluorescent lights flickered over the long, polished boardroom table. Half-drunk cups of coffee and sweating glasses of club soda littered every surface. No one had touched the catered shrimp cocktail. Mark Toland leaned forward, both elbows on the table, eyes red. "We need a reset." No one spoke. "I don't care how much it costs. I want a press blitz. Ads, op-eds, influencers, staged apology videos. Hell, let's run full-page spreads in the Journal." His PR director cleared her throat. "That won't change the compliance status." "Then we call Cross," Mark snapped. "We tell him, we're sorry. We'll restructure, give him a board seat if he wants one." The head of legal shook her head slowly. "You think this is about him?" Mark froze. "This isn't about Nathaniel Cross anymore," she said. "This is about us. What we covered up, what we ignored, what we chose not to fix when we had the chance." Meanwhile, Nathaniel sat in silence. Not in New York, not in D.C. He was at his lake house in upstate Vermont. No reception, no cameras, no noise. Just snow outside the wide glass windows and the steady warmth of the fire. He didn't say a word, but others were speaking for him. The FAA convened its Emergency Ethics Committee the next morning. What was originally intended as a closed-door discussion had ballooned into a full-fledged inquiry, because just hours earlier, a file had landed anonymously in the FAA ethics inbox. Its subject line was simple. This didn't start with Nathaniel Cross. He was just the first who could fight back. Attached was a 47-page PDF. The sender was Amira Clarkson, a low-level compliance analyst at Regalis Airways, 27 years old. Started 3 years ago, fresh out of grad school, paid little, ignored often. Her report contained internal memos, time-stamped complaint files, and email chains. In 3 of the documents, she had flagged flight incidents involving a black mother being asked to prove she purchased both tickets for her and her child. A veteran in uniform being told to wait in economy until we're sure. A Nigerian-American software engineer who was denied lounge access despite valid credentials. All 3 incidents occurred on flights that were later flagged by EthicAir, and all 3 complaints were marked internally with the same phrase: low priority, no action needed. In her statement, Amira wrote, "I was told not to escalate these. I was told to be a team player. But this isn't a team. It's a shield, and I won't be part of it anymore." By noon, her name was trending on Twitter. Not Nathaniel's, hers. Mira spoke /compliance. Is not silence net ethic id what fe? Wouldn't she received over 3,000 job offers in 24 hours? Back at Regalis HQ, panic turned to paralysis. What do we even do now? The COO asked, watching CNBC broadcast Amira's memo live on air. The PR head said flatly, "At this point, nothing we say will sound real. Everyone else already told the truth before we opened our mouths." The CFO whispered, "What's Nathaniel doing right now?" No one answered, but the truth was, he was still at the lake house, sitting by the window, reading, not reacting, just watching the storm he didn't start, but no longer needed to steer. That same afternoon, the FAA issued a formal notice. Effective immediately, all FAA-certified airlines will be subject to random EthicAir integrated ethics audits as part of renewal procedures. In short, EthicAir wasn't just advisory anymore, it was embedded. Airlines could no longer operate without clearing Nathaniel's system. Inside the Regalis IT department, one engineer looked at the live analytics dashboard and muttered, "We lost 4 international gates this morning alone. That's $43 million in projected Q2 revenue." Another added, "Airport contracts are saying we're provisionally blocked, pending external ethics certification." They're all citing EthicAir. The senior systems architect finally said it out loud. "This isn't a boycott. This is infrastructure warfare." At 5:03 p.m., a single image went viral. Someone posted a black and white photo of Nathaniel from 15 years ago, young, suited, standing beside his late mentor, Dr. Lena Mbatha, who had once tried to establish an independent ethics certification for global transport, but was laughed out of the room by industry executives. The caption read, "She planted it, he watered it, and now it's growing through the concrete." The photo appeared on NPR, Rolling Stone, and the homepage of Time magazine within 6 hours. And still, Nathaniel hadn't said a word. Didn't need to. His silence had become the industry's mirror. Regalis wasn't the only one bleeding. By Thursday morning, the ripple had become a wave. And that wave? It was dragging every airline in North America into open water. At Horizon Air headquarters in Atlanta, 20 executives huddled in a soundproof boardroom with floor-to-ceiling glass walls. CEO Dana Merrill didn't bother with introductions. "We are no longer facing public outrage," she began. "We are facing systemic disqualification." The head of compliance raised a trembling hand. "We've never had a single EthicAir violation. But investors are still calling us at 6 a.m. We lost 2 ESG partners just because we didn't have a rating yet." Dana looked up from her tablet. Then maybe it's time we get one. A murmur ran across the room. You mean? Someone whispered. She nodded. Yes, I'm formally requesting a voluntary EthicAir audit. Within 90 minutes, 5 other airlines followed. By that evening, the number had risen to 23, and just like that, Nathaniel Cross became the most pursued man in the industry, without saying a single word. At FAA headquarters in Washington, D.C., the tone was different. Urgency, pressure, politics. They summoned him, formally. Mr. Cross, read the notice. Your presence is requested for a closed-door advisory hearing on aviation ethics systems and federal compliance integration. He didn't answer right away. In fact, he didn't respond at all. His assistant did. Mr. Cross will attend the session as requested. He will not be offering oral commentary. His system speaks on his behalf. So at 3:00 p.m. on a rainy Friday, Nathaniel Cross walked silently into a federal chamber surrounded by 12 agency officials, 2 senators, and 1 journalist embedded under NDA. He wore a charcoal gray suit, no tie, no notes, just a single silver pin on his lapel. The logo of EthicAir, a circle split evenly down the middle, half blue, half white. He sat down, nodded once. The chairwoman asked him her first question. Mr. Cross, how do you recommend we enforce a nationwide baseline for passenger dignity compliance? He tapped once on his iPad. The screen behind him lit up. Let the data choose. That was all. The next day, those 4 words were printed on the front page of the New York Times. Let the data choose. 4 syllables, no hashtags, no campaign. But it hit like a policy paper and a protest chant at the same time. CNN ran a panel on it. The Guardian called it the most quietly powerful philosophy since Rosa Parks refused to move. Forbes dubbed Nathaniel the architect of dignity, and every major airline CEO was now holding daily war room briefings with one central question. What's our EthicAir score? Over in Dallas, a mid-tier airline called JetFair became the first to publish their score publicly, a humble 62.4 out of 100. The internet exploded. At least they're honest. Transparency is the new currency. I'll fly JetFair over the silent giants. That transparency triggered a domino effect. By Sunday night, 8 airlines had posted their scores. 3 voluntarily grounded select routes pending internal audit. 1 hired a former EthicAir architect to help redesign their training system. Meanwhile, Nathaniel was back at his office. His inbox had over 9,200 emails. His calendar had 41 unconfirmed interview requests. He ignored all of them. But then he did something unexpected. He sent 1 email to 1 person with 1 sentence. Subject line, your move. Recipient, Mark Toland. Body, clean house, or the market will do it for you. No greeting, no closing. No second sentence. It was posted to the Regalis intranet less than an hour later, anonymously, but clearly leaked. The press got hold of it, and it went viral. Again, one former executive from Regalis, now retired, told NPR, I worked with Nathaniel years ago. The scariest thing about him isn't his silence. It's that he never threatens. He just gives you a chance to make the right call before the ground shifts under you. The airline industry had changed, but no one had announced it. It had simply shifted, like the tide, slow and quiet, but irreversible. And in that shift, power found a new voice. Not loud, not angry, just accountable. Nathaniel Cross still hadn't spoken to the press. He didn't need to. The world was now fluent in his language. She didn't expect it to follow her home. But when Karen Whitmore boarded that plane with her designer tote and her diamond-crusted entitlement, she never thought the backlash would last more than a news cycle. She thought it was just an uncomfortable moment with a loud man. She never imagined the man ran the system that would soon make her unemployable by association. At first, it was just a few comments. A blurry photo posted by another passenger showing her standing, lips tight, hand on hip, towering over the first-class aisle where Nathaniel had stood moments earlier. The caption, she said, "That bag cost more than your seat," and the internet never forgot. By day 2, TikTok had already spun it into satire. A creator lip-synced her line while slowly zipping up a fake handbag made of trash bags and duct tape. The tag had designer bag. Karen hit 4.8 million views in 24 hours. Then the real digging began. Someone found her LinkedIn, then a charity gala program with her face on the cover, then the name, Karen Elizabeth Whitmore, board treasurer of the Whitmore Family Foundation, a well-known philanthropic group specializing in early education grants and ESG-aligned projects. Within hours, donors started pulling out, and by Friday, it hit the system. EthicAir received a direct request from one of its ESG oversight partners. Does the Whitmore Foundation's board membership align with current ethics standards in light of the ongoing airline incident? Nathaniel never answered directly. He didn't have to. The index shifted automatically. The Whitmore Foundation's ESG status changed from aligned to under ethics review. That single flag triggered 3 outcomes. $38 million in pending ESG funding was paused. 2 partner schools dropped affiliation. The foundation's name was removed from 3 digital ESG directories. By Sunday morning, a news anchor on MSNBC asked the question out loud. Is this the first case of reverse reputational contagion from a personal incident to a nonprofit boardroom? And the response from viewers? Explosive. Karen tried to post a statement on Instagram. I've always believed in kindness and dignity. The recent portrayal of events has hurt me and my family. The comments were brutal. You believe in dignity, but not giving up 1 seat? Ma'am, your bag got more respect than a human being. Try kindness next time instead of couture. And then came the real blow. Saviona, the luxury brand behind the handbag she flaunted, remained silent for 72 hours. No post, no statement, no distancing. It cost them dearly. In just 1 week. Their IG account lost 1.1 million followers. 3 department stores quietly moved the brand off their front display racks. Several prominent black celebrities unfollowed and pulled promo partnerships. An activist group began posting mock ads online. Carry ethics, not just bags. Savione finally issued a neutral tone statement on day 6. We support dignity in all forms and encourage respectful travel experiences for everyone. Too late. By then, EthicAir's influence had already seeped into consumer ethics rating apps, and Savione's responsibility score had dropped 22 points. All of this, all from 1 seat, 1 moment, 1 bag, 1 man's quiet refusal to bend. And yet, Nathaniel Cross never commented publicly. His team released no statements. His social media stayed dark. The only indication that he even knew about the cascading chaos? A private message, quietly confirmed but never published, sent to an unnamed Regalis HR employee who had filed a discrimination complaint 6 years ago and was ignored. The message simply read, I didn't forget, NC. A week after the incident, Time magazine published a cover story titled, The Ethics Reboot, How 1 Seat Became a Tipping Point for Corporate Morality. On the cover was not Nathaniel, but the bag, alone on a first-class seat, empty. The subtitle, When Status Outweighed Ethics, the Market Responded. Meanwhile, Karen's foundation officially lost its ESG certification. Her seat on the board was reconsidered. The PR team for her family went dark, and Karen, for the first time in years, disappeared from the gala circuit entirely. The last photo of her online? A grainy paparazzi shot of her walking out of a Manhattan cafe with sunglasses on, avoiding cameras. No designer bag, just a tote. Plain, cotton, unbranded. The caption under the reshared photo said it best. She lost $880 million in funding, but at least she got to sit down first. It was bound to happen. The moment silence gained power, someone would try to weaponize it. By the 10th day after the flight incident, Nathaniel Cross was no longer just a CEO. He had become an institution. And institutions make people nervous, especially those who can't control them. At first, the emails came privately. A group of 5 airlines, 2 major domestic, 1 European, and 2 mid-tier, sent formal inquiries to Regalis's general counsel. Would Mr. Cross consider a strategic partnership with our internal compliance boards in exchange for technical guidance on EthicAir alignment? Translation: help us boost our score and we'll fund your system. Nathaniel didn't reply. He didn't have to. EthicAir had no subscription, no pay-to-play tier. It scored what it saw. Period. Then came the playbook move. A smear attempt. Skyverge Airlines, one of the 5 companies, made the first bold misstep. On Monday morning, a leaked internal memo was anonymously distributed to 3 media outlets. One of them was eager enough to publish it without verifying. The memo suggested the flight incident involving Karen and Nathaniel was orchestrated. That Nathaniel had deliberately booked under a pseudonym, knowing the seat would be contested, to stage a socially charged media event that would generate sympathy and consolidate industry influence. For about 18 hours, the narrative stuck. Cable news shows began asking questions. One conservative pundit said, "Is the ethics czar actually manipulating us for clout?" Social media split into 2 camps. One defending him. "He never even spoke. Y'all mad at silence now?" The other asking, "What if this whole thing was a setup?" Nathaniel still said nothing. No press release, no tweet, no response. But exactly 48 hours after the first article broke, EthicAir updated its homepage with a new banner, clarifying the record. Skyverge Airlines, Compliance Review Findings, 2018 to 2024. Underneath it was a 36-page downloadable PDF. Inside, 17 documented internal reports of racially motivated seating reassignments, 5 settled lawsuits involving elderly, disabled, and minority passengers, 3 recorded trainings with materials that included tiered courtesy prioritization by dress code, and 1 buried HR email chain, uncovered by an ethics whistleblower that read, "Passengers who don't visually align with premium class aesthetics should be reseated when possible." The PDF dropped like a thunderclap. By noon, #BoycottSkyverge was trending. By evening, 2 of its ESG investors pulled out. By midnight, its board called an emergency session. One journalist wrote, "Nathaniel didn't need to clap back. His system did it for him, with receipts." Inside Regalis's headquarters, the air was still. Nathaniel reviewed every page of the Skyverge PDF quietly. No expression, no glee. Just precision. He closed the file and asked his assistant, Maya, "Has anyone from Skyverge reached out?" She checked. 3 voicemails, 1 legal rep, 1 VP of PR, and the CEO. He nodded. "Delete them." Meanwhile, other airlines were scrambling, not just to repair, but to distance. Jetfair, the first company to publish their score a week earlier, posted, "We stand by the principle that ethics must be proven, not purchased." Even Dana Merilel at Horizon Air issued a statement. "Our focus is real reform, not reputational smokescreens." Skyverge tried damage control. Too late. Their attempt to discredit Nathaniel had only spotlighted their own rot. A former flight attendant came forward with screenshots of training materials. An ex-passenger recounted being downgraded after staff told her she was causing discomfort by not looking the part. And suddenly, this wasn't a CEO's story anymore. It was an industry reckoning. Back in his home in upstate New York, Nathaniel sat by the fireplace reading The Souls of Black Folk. His daughter, Alina, walked in, watching the firelight dance in his glasses. "You saw the news?" she asked. "I did." "They tried to frame you." "They did." "You're not going to say anything?" He turned to her with a half smile. "Alina, when the truth is loud enough, you don't have to raise your voice." The next morning, a Bloomberg columnist wrote, "Nathaniel Cross has built something more terrifying than public opinion, a system no PR firm can negotiate with." And investors were taking note. 2 ethics-aligned funds increased stakes in airlines with rising EthicAir scores. Airline executives began seeking private briefings, not from Nathaniel, but from former Regalis engineers who helped build the protocol. As the week closed, Nathaniel posted a rare update on his company's website. "We don't penalize mistakes, we penalize cover-ups." EthicAir Charter, Section 4.2. No hashtags, no logos, just clarity. The real message was clear: try to lie, and the system will bury you. And Skyverge, dropped from 2 global booking platforms, suspended by the FAA from bidding on federal travel contracts pending audit. CEO under board review. Nathaniel didn't have to say a word. He had built something stronger than a press conference. He had built consequence. It wasn't about revenge. Not for Nathaniel. It never had been. That seat, that woman with the bag, that moment in first class, that was just the ignition. What came next was infrastructure. 2 weeks had passed since the incident that lit up every corner of the aviation world. And while headlines cooled, meetings multiplied behind the scenes. FAA, ESG funds, consumer watchdogs, airport alliances, aviation attorneys, whistleblowers. They weren't just talking about what happened on that flight. They were rewriting what would happen next. Nathaniel's silence had now become its own kind of command. Every CEO, every compliance officer, every ethics board member now had a folder on their desk. It was titled EthicAir Index, Route Protocol Review, Phase 2. What no one outside knew was this. That seat Karen thought she won by flaunting her $8,500 designer bag, it didn't just spark outrage, it unlocked a protocol. Because when Nathaniel quietly logged in from the flight, when he activated his emergency oversight ID that day, he didn't just freeze an ethics score. He opened a chain trigger mechanism. Something called ClearPath Cascade. A protocol only he and 2 engineers at Regalis had access to. What it did was simple. It scanned all ethics behavior compliance patterns from 92 global airports and cross-referenced them with real-time ESG fund holdings, minority passenger complaints, and consumer trust scores. If a pattern of negligence or discrimination emerged from any airline connected to 3 or more flagged airports, it triggered multi-network freeze advisories. It didn't block capital. It simply warned banks, funds, insurance underwriters, and airport coalitions. This operator may be in breach of ethics sustainability compliance. And when that happens, money moves. Fast. By the time Chapter 10 began, the results were undeniable. 4 major U.S. airlines had received temporary ESG holds. 3 international carriers had their airport cooperation scores downgraded. 2 booking platforms began integrating EthicAir's API for public transparency. Over $880 million in funding was either frozen or redirected. But Nathaniel wasn't done. He had one final move, and it would not be a press conference. It would be a summit. The official name, Passenger Ethics and Infrastructure Reform Consortium, Geneva, 2025. Unofficially, people called it the Cross Accord. Only 100 seats. Attendance by invitation only. Location, a sealed conference center in Switzerland, with direct security supervision from the European Aviation Commission and 2 UN observers. Attendees, CEOs of 12 major global airlines, executives from top 10 ESG fund managers, leaders from 21 airport coalitions, FAA, IATA, and European Commission ethics officials, a select group of victims and whistleblowers whose stories had gone unheard for decades. When the doors closed, Nathaniel stood at the front of the room. No teleprompter, no slide deck, just a simple tablet. And this was all he said. The system is broken, but now it's observable, auditable, traceable. That means there's no excuse left. The summit lasted 3 days. By the end, the industry changed. Forever. What happened next? The Passenger Dignity Protocol was adopted. a global ethics framework defining how airlines must treat all passengers, regardless of class, race, dress, or demeanor. The Clear Path Cascade system was ratified, giving ethics officers the authority to flag and freeze funding access for airlines that violate baseline human rights standards. EthicAir score publication mandate was signed, requiring every major airline operating in the US, Canada, UK, and EU to publicly display their ethics score monthly. Whistleblower Protection Tier Alpha was launched, a secure system for crew and passengers to report abuse without retaliation, backed by real-time legal shielding via blockchain timestamps. The Karen Clause, unofficially titled but formally written as Clause 7.14, banned any seating reassignment based on personal bias, object aesthetics, or visual disruption. Nathaniel never asked for applause. He didn't want the spotlight. But 2 weeks after the summit, Time magazine put him on the cover again, this time not as a symbol of protest, but of design. The headline read, "The Architect: How Nathaniel Cross Built a System That Made Airlines Answer to Morality." Karen Whitmore's name didn't appear again. Not in business press, not in fashion features, not in philanthropic roundtables. Her family's foundation quietly restructured, her bag's designer rebranded. The silence around her was loud, but not cruel, just final. Meanwhile, Regalis Airways became the first airline to receive the Platinum Ethics Compliance rating across 31 nations. Nathaniel, he went back to upstate New York, back to his books, back to walking his dog before dawn, back to watching the world adapt, slowly, imperfectly, to the systems he left behind. He never spoke of that day again. Not the bag, not the seat, not the look in Karen's eyes. But when someone asked him, months later, what really changed the game, he paused and said, it wasn't power, it was pattern recognition. And that was it. Because this wasn't just about a seat. This wasn't just about a bag. It was about a quiet black man with authority who refused to perform anger and instead performed accountability. And the world had no choice but to follow. Weeks after the Geneva summit, quiet ripples turned into waves. The reforms Nathaniel had helped ignite weren't just industry-wide. They were becoming policy precedents. In Washington, a bipartisan ethics panel cited the Passenger Dignity Protocol during hearings on transportation reform. One senator remarked, "For years we regulated planes for safety. Maybe it's time we regulated them for humanity." In Brussels, the European Commission began drafting new guidelines requiring real-time ethics dashboards in all participating airports, visible to passengers as they boarded. And in the private sector, something even more unexpected happened. Investors started rewarding airlines with higher ethics scores. It wasn't just about avoiding scandal anymore. It became a mark of value. Airlines that adopted the EthicAir API saw a 3 to 5% rise in brand favorability, a reduction in legal claims, and spikes in loyalty retention from previously underrepresented groups. Some airlines even launched public campaigns. We treat everyone like they paid the same. Jet Verity, seats don't have a color code. Horizon West, you don't have to look rich to fly right. Regalis, Nathaniel didn't write it, but he approved it. Behind closed doors, however, the story deepened. One night, back in his home study, Nathaniel received a handwritten letter. No return address. Elegant penmanship. Inside was a simple message. I never imagined that my bag would cost this much. Maybe I never imagined how little I'd actually paid. I'm sorry, not for what you did, but for what I refused to see. It was signed, K.W. Nathaniel didn't frame it. He didn't show it to anyone. He folded it carefully and placed it in an old first-class menu he had kept from the early days of Regalis's founding. Not out of sentiment, but out of symmetry. Because in the end, what mattered wasn't that she apologized, but that the world now understood why she had to. And when a reporter later asked Nathaniel during a quiet moment backstage at a transportation ethics event, "Do you think justice was served?" He smiled faintly. No, but Justice got its boarding pass, and just like that, he disappeared into the crowd. No entourage, no badge, just a man walking freely through the terminal of a world he helped change. 3 months after the Geneva summit, something unusual happened. A teenager boarded a Regalis Airways flight from Atlanta to Frankfurt and didn't know his life was about to change, and that Nathaniel Cross would quietly witness it. He wasn't traveling for business or PR. He wasn't in a suit. He was just flying. Alone. Row 12A. Coach. Nathaniel had booked his own seat quietly. Economy window, no entourage, no boardroom, no CEO presence. Sometimes, he liked to watch how the system worked when no one thought it was watching. But this flight wasn't just about oversight, it was about seeing the ripple. The boy, 17 maybe, wore a hoodie and held an envelope with shaky fingers. A man across the aisle glanced at him, then dismissed him. A woman, a row behind, whispered something sharp when the boy accidentally bumped her seat. Nathaniel kept watching. The boy didn't argue, didn't flinch. He just sat, unfolded the envelope, and stared down at the pages inside. Some scholarship forms, a German address, a train ticket to Berlin. Nathaniel leaned back. This was the story. Not the summit, not the boardroom, but the boy who'd likely gotten that scholarship because a new passenger ethics fund had been established, seeded by ESG assets redistributed from the airlines that failed their audits. One of the first beneficiaries had been a coalition of youth education orgs focused on underserved communities in aviation-adjacent cities. Atlanta was one of them. And this kid? He probably had no idea he was flying on the very system that made his seat possible. That's when a flight attendant approached him. The woman who had whispered behind him leaned slightly into the aisle, watching. The tension was faint, but familiar. Nathaniel's fingers curled slightly. But the flight attendant didn't scold him. She smiled. "You want to move up to row 7? One of our premium economy seats just opened up. You'll have more legroom." The boy blinked. "Why me?" he asked. She replied without hesitation. "Because it's your first trip abroad, and we believe dignity shouldn't be a reward. It should be a starting point." Nathaniel exhaled. Softly, quietly. No headlines. No press releases. Just a moment that wouldn't have happened 6 months ago. When they landed, Nathaniel waited at baggage claim, a few paces behind the crowd. The boy turned around once, looked at him curiously, as if he recognized him. He didn't say anything. Nathaniel smiled, gave a small nod, and turned toward the exit. He never told him who he was. Back in New York, the world moved fast again. But this time, it was different. The reforms weren't just holding, they were expanding. A tech startup began developing bias detection software for crew customer interactions, trained using anonymized incident footage and ethics feedback. A federal transportation subcommittee held a hearing titled The EthicAir Standard, Measuring Fairness in the Sky. 3 major insurance groups now used EthicAir's score as part of their policy pricing models. An airport design firm proposed ethics-first terminal layouts. Seating that didn't segregate by wealth, but offered comfort tiers without shame. And perhaps most striking, a group of flight attendants formed a union chapter focused solely on passenger dignity and accountability. Nathaniel was flooded with interview requests. He declined most, but there was one invitation he didn't refuse, a high school in Harlem, his old one. When he walked into the auditorium, he didn't bring cameras, just stories. He looked out at the students, a few half asleep, some whispering, a handful watching him like he wasn't real. Then he said, "I built a system that tracks how people behave when they think they're anonymous. And I found something powerful. Sometimes, the quietest moment reveals the loudest truth." A girl raised her hand. "But how did you know people would listen?" Nathaniel smiled. "I didn't. I just made sure they couldn't look away." The crowd laughed softly, but the tone had shifted. He wasn't lecturing them. He was showing them the data, the stories, the reason systems matter more than outrage. Another student asked if he ever wanted to sue the woman with the designer bag. He shook his head. I could have taken her down, but I didn't want to bring someone down. I wanted to lift the standard up. After the talk, a teacher asked if he would speak at the National Ethics Education Conference next spring. He paused. Only if you let one of these kids speak with me. And that was that. By winter, the FAA passed the Cross Mandate, a federal charter requiring all major U.S. airlines to integrate real-time passenger feedback ethics scores into their crew performance metrics. And internationally, the UK, Canada, Germany, and South Korea had each signed independent bilateral ethics agreements with Regalis, using the EthicAir Index as a template. Airline CEOs grumbled, but signed. As for Karen, she had moved, stepped down from her charity roles, issued a quiet apology through a family representative. Her face faded from the news, not because the world forgot, but because the world outgrew the moment that made her infamous. And that may have been the deepest justice of all. One snowy evening in February, Nathaniel stood by his fireplace with a mug of tea, watching the trees outside rustle in the wind. His phone buzzed once. A notification. Clear Path Cascade Update. 19 airlines now certified ethics stable. He turned the screen off. No celebration, no post, just the warmth of proof. Proof that one small act of dismissal, one moment that said, "You don't belong here," could become the hinge of industry-wide recalibration. He didn't build an empire. He built a mirror and made the world stand in front of it. 6 months after that flight, Nathaniel Cross did something no one expected. He quietly stepped down. No press conference, no investor letter with dramatic phrasing, no boardroom politics, just a simple private message to his board and executive team. I've done what I came here to do. Now it's someone else's gate to clear. He'd spent 28 years building Regalis Airways into one of the most respected international carriers in the industry. And in less than 1 year, he'd turned it into the moral compass of modern aviation. But this moment, was about letting go. Because true legacy isn't just in the architecture, it's in who you trust to fly the next route. The announcement broke the next morning in the Wall Street Journal. Nathaniel Cross, architect of aviation ethics reform, retires from Regalis. The article listed his accolades: the 880 Maltem ESG impact, the 4-country ethics agreements, the FAA mandate named in his honor. But what stood out? He named his successor, not another corporate veteran, not a board-favored heir. He named Amira Vance, a 37-year-old ethics systems engineer, former flight attendant, Harvard-trained data scientist, black, sharp, quietly fierce. She wasn't just qualified. She was proof. Proof that the system he built had produced leaders who didn't need to be angry to be powerful. The day Amira took over, Nathaniel watched the live stream from his kitchen table. She didn't thank him directly. She didn't cry. She didn't posture. She simply looked into the camera and said, "Every traveler has a seat, and every seat should come with dignity, not by luck, not by appearance, but by design." And then she added, "We're not finished." Nathaniel smiled and turned the stream off. She'd be fine. Later that week, Nathaniel flew commercial again, this time not on Regalis. He chose an airline that had once failed the EthicAir Index. He wanted to see if the message had really traveled. At check-in, the agent greeted him with respect. No extra smiles, no overcompensation. At security, the agent glanced at his ID and said, "Thank you for what you did, sir." And on the plane, he sat in row 17, middle seat, next to a white woman who didn't know who he was. She smiled when he sat down, didn't clutch her purse, didn't glance around nervously. They made small talk. She offered him gum. He offered her the window when she got claustrophobic. And somewhere over Denver, she asked what he did. He paused. "I used to build systems." She smiled. That sounds important. He shrugged. It used to be. She nodded and went back to her crossword. No recognition, no need. And that was the win. Back in New York, he spent his days volunteering with a local aviation academy, tutoring teens in math and design. He didn't tell them who he was unless they asked. Some of them guessed. One girl, maybe 16, walked up after a session and asked, "Are you the guy from the airport bag story?" He raised an eyebrow. "You mean the guy who almost lost his seat?" She grinned. "No, the guy who made the industry stop pretending." He chuckled. "Yeah, that one's me." She nodded. "Good. I needed to know someone like me could do that." And then she walked off. That night, he sat on his porch, looking at the city skyline. It was quieter now, or maybe he just heard it differently. He reached for the old folded letter from KW, still tucked inside the vintage menu, still unread by anyone else. He unfolded it again, read the apology, not for how she acted, but for what she had chosen not to see. He didn't hold bitterness, not anymore, because now the system didn't need Nathaniel Cross to function. It stood on its own. 6 months later, the EthicAir Index was adopted by 2 new international alliances. Regalis was ranked #1 in ethics for the 4th consecutive quarter. And Amira? She launched Flight Front, a public ethics transparency portal where passengers could review crew ethics metrics, share stories, and anonymously flag behavior for review. She wasn't maintaining Nathaniel's vision. She was expanding it, turning it into something bigger than memory. 1 year to the day after his final flight as CEO, Nathaniel returned to the Regalis Executive Lounge, this time as a regular passenger. The receptionist smiled at him. "Welcome back, Mr. Cross." He paused. "How did you—" She smiled. "Your name's still on the founding wall, right next to Passenger Dignity Starts Here." He stepped inside. The room hadn't changed, but the feeling had. Because now, every person in that room, no matter how expensive their bag was, no matter what language they spoke, was there by right, not assumption. And as he sat in the corner with a coffee, no one stared. No one challenged his presence. No one whispered, "You don't belong here," because now, he did. And so did everyone else. Have you ever been made to feel like you didn't belong somewhere until one moment changed everything? Tell us where you're watching from, and if a moment like that ever happened to you.